I know you're busy. I know your mind is racing with 1,000 concerns, bills to pay, problems to solve, fears about tomorrow. I know the world feels heavy right now, maybe heavier than it's ever felt before. But I'm asking you, from one soul to another, to give me just a few moments of your time. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another story. It's a message that traveled from heaven to earth through my 12-year-old son, and it's a message that could change everything about how you face the days ahead. Please take a moment now to comment below where you're reading or watching from, and what brought you here today. Let's build this community together. I'll be reading every comment, and I'm sending love to each and every one of you, wherever you are in this beautiful, broken, precious world of ours. I never believed in miracles. Not really. Not the kind you read about in books or hear whispered in church pews on quiet Sunday mornings. I was a practical woman, grounded in the tangible realities of bills, work schedules, and the endless cycle of daily routines. Faith was something I acknowledged but kept at arm's length, a distant concept that belonged more to my childhood than to my adult life. But all of that changed on a cold autumn evening in our small suburban neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon, when my son Daniel stopped breathing at our kitchen table. Daniel was 12 years old that October. He was an ordinary boy in every sense of the word, with messy brown hair that never quite stayed combed, a collection of skateboard stickers covering his bedroom door, and a laugh that could fill our entire house. He loved video games, hated doing his homework, and had recently developed an obsession with making elaborate sandwiches that defied both gravity and good taste. My husband Thomas and I had 2 children, Daniel and his older brother Marcus, who was 15 at the time. We were a typical American family navigating the complexities of modern life, trying to make ends meet while the world around us seemed to grow more chaotic with each passing day. That particular evening started like any other. I had prepared meatloaf with mashed potatoes, one of Daniel's favorite meals, and we gathered around our worn oak table as dusk settled over the neighborhood. The television murmured news in the background, something about rising tensions overseas and economic troubles at home, but we tried to focus on each other instead. Thomas asked Marcus about his algebra test, and I reminded Daniel about his science project due the following week. It was beautifully, wonderfully mundane. Then, without warning, Daniel's fork clattered to his plate. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward. At first, I thought he was joking, playing one of his silly pranks to avoid eating his vegetables. But when I reached across the table and touched his shoulder, his body was completely limp. The color had drained from his face, leaving his skin a terrifying shade of gray. What happened next exists in my memory as a series of fragmented images and sounds. Thomas shouting Daniel's name. Marcus frozen in shock, his face white as paper. My own voice, high and desperate, screaming for someone to call for help. I remember pulling Daniel from his chair, laying him on the cold kitchen floor, his body so small and lifeless beneath my trembling hands. Thomas began performing CPR while I called emergency services, my fingers barely able to dial the numbers through my panic. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, though it felt like hours. They worked on my son with controlled urgency, their faces professional masks that revealed nothing. I watched them attach electrodes, insert and compress his chest with mechanical precision. Marcus stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face, while Thomas held me back from interfering with their work. One of the paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes, kept repeating that they were doing everything they could, but I saw the concern etched in the lines around her mouth. They transported Daniel to Providence Medical Center, and we followed in our car, speeding through red lights while Thomas gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. At the hospital, they rushed Daniel into the emergency room while we were directed to a sterile waiting area with fluorescent lights that hurt my eyes. A doctor came out approximately 30 minutes later, and I will never forget the weight of his words. He told us that Daniel's heart had stopped. They had worked on him for nearly 12 minutes before finally detecting a faint rhythm. 12 minutes. I learned later that brain damage typically occurs after just 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. The doctor explained that Daniel was now stable but unresponsive. They were running tests to determine what had caused the cardiac arrest and to assess potential brain damage. He spoke about induced comas, neurological assessments, and uncertain outcomes. I heard the words but couldn't process them. My 12-year-old son, who had been laughing at breakfast that morning, was fighting for his life. We spent that night in the hospital, Thomas and I taking turns sitting beside Daniel's bed while Marcus dozed fitfully in a chair in the corner. Daniel looked so small connected to all those machines, tubes running into his arms, monitors beeping steadily. I held his hand and prayed for the first time in years, not the rote prayers of my childhood but desperate, bargaining pleas with a God I wasn't sure was listening. Then, just before dawn, Daniel opened his eyes. The change was immediate and startling. The monitors that had been showing concerning patterns suddenly stabilized. His color returned, flooding back into his cheeks like someone had turned on a light from within. A nurse who had been checking his vitals gasped and called for the doctor. Within minutes, the room filled with medical staff, all staring at the monitors in disbelief. One doctor kept repeating that it was impossible, that patients don't simply wake up like this after what Daniel had been through. But Daniel was awake, and more than that, he was calm. There was no confusion, no disorientation that the doctors had warned us to expect. His eyes, when they met mine, held a clarity and depth I had never seen before. He looked at me and said my name, and I broke down completely, sobbing against his hospital bed while Thomas wrapped his arms around both of us. The doctors wanted to run more tests, to understand what had happened, but Daniel insisted on speaking with us first. The nurses reluctantly gave us privacy, though they left the door open and continued monitoring him from the hallway. Marcus moved closer, taking Daniel's other hand, and we waited for him to speak. What Daniel told us that morning would change our lives forever. He started by telling me that he remembered the moment everything went dark at the dinner table. He revealed to me that there had been a sudden, sharp pain in his chest, and then a sensation of falling, as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. But he said the fear only lasted for a moment, because immediately afterward, he felt himself rising, floating upward in a way that defied everything he understood about the world. Daniel described to me how he had found himself hovering near the ceiling of our kitchen, looking down at his own body sprawled on the floor. He told me he could see me crying, could see Thomas performing chest compressions with tears streaming down his face, could see Marcus standing in the doorway with his phone pressed to his ear. He said that Marcus had been whispering a prayer, something their grandmother had taught them years ago, and that he could hear every word even though Marcus's voice was barely audible. He explained to me that he had felt no pain in that moment, only a strange sense of peace mixed with confusion. He revealed that he had tried to call out to us, to tell us he was okay, but his voice produced no sound. He said he could see everything happening in perfect detail, including the moment the paramedics arrived and began working on his physical body below. Then, Daniel told me, everything changed. He said a brilliant light appeared above him, not harsh or blinding but warm and inviting, like sunlight filtering through honey. He revealed to me that he felt an irresistible pull toward this light, and despite a part of him wanting to stay with us, another part, something deeper and more ancient, yearned to move forward. He told me he surrendered to this pull and felt himself being drawn upward through what he could only describe as a tunnel. The way Daniel described this tunnel still gives me chills. He told me it seemed to be made of swirling colors that don't exist in our world, shades that have no names in any language. He said he could hear music, though not the kind we hear on radios or in concerts. He revealed to me that it was more like the universe itself was singing, every note perfectly harmonized with every other note, creating a symphony that spoke directly to his soul rather than his ears. As he moved through this tunnel, Daniel explained, he became aware of presences around him, though he couldn't see them clearly. He told me they felt like companions, like guides who were escorting him towards something important. He said these beings communicated with him not through words but through feelings and knowings that appeared directly in his consciousness. They reassured him that everything was unfolding as it should, that he was safe, and that what he was about to experience would change him forever. When he emerged from the tunnel, Daniel revealed to me that he found himself in a place of indescribable beauty. He told me the closest comparison he could make was to a vast meadow that stretched endlessly in all directions, but the grass beneath his feet seemed to glow with an inner light, and the sky above held colors that shifted and flowed like liquid rainbows. He said there were structures in the distance, buildings made of crystalline light that seemed to sing their own songs, and trees that bore fruits he had never seen before, fruits that appeared to pulse with life and vitality. But what struck Daniel most, what he emphasized repeatedly as he told me this story, was the overwhelming sense of love that permeated everything in this place. He explained to me that every atom, every particle of existence in this realm vibrated with a love so pure and unconditional that it made everything we experience on Earth seem like pale shadows. He told me he finally understood what home meant, not the physical house we lived in but a sense of belonging so complete that he had never felt incomplete or alone. As Daniel stood in this meadow, he revealed to me that he became aware of a figure approaching from the distance. He said that at first, this being appeared as a concentration of light more brilliant than anything else around him, but as the figure drew closer, features began to resolve. He told me he knew, without any doubt or question, that he was in the presence of Jesus Christ. The way Daniel described this encounter still brings tears to my eyes. He told me that Jesus appeared not as the pale figure in the paintings we see in churches but as someone whose very presence seemed to encompass all of humanity. He said Jesus's eyes held infinite compassion, wisdom, and love, and that when those eyes met his, Daniel felt as if every moment of his entire existence, past and future, was understood and accepted completely. He revealed to me that Jesus smiled at him, a smile of such warmth and recognition that Daniel felt his very soul expand to receive it. Jesus spoke to Daniel, he told me, though again the communication happened in ways that transcended ordinary speech. He said the words appeared in his mind and heart simultaneously, carrying meanings far deeper than language alone could convey. Jesus addressed him by name and told him that he had been brought to this place for a specific purpose. Daniel revealed to me that Jesus explained he had been chosen to carry a message back to the world, a warning and a hope for humanity in the challenging times ahead. What Jesus showed Daniel next was difficult for my son to describe and even more difficult for me to hear as his mother. He told me that Jesus extended his hand and suddenly visions began unfolding around them, scenes from Earth's future that were both terrifying and heartbreaking. Daniel said he witnessed cities he recognized, places we had visited on family vacations, experiencing devastating natural disasters. He revealed to me that he saw Seattle, where his grandmother lived, being struck by massive earthquakes that toppled buildings and tore apart highways. He told me he saw wildfires consuming the forests of California with an intensity that turned day into night, families fleeing with only what they could carry while flames devoured everything they had known. He explained to me that Jesus showed him powerful hurricanes, not just one but several, devastating the eastern coastline from Florida all the way up to the Carolinas. Daniel said he could see the faces of people huddled in emergency shelters, could hear their prayers for safety and relief. He told me he witnessed flooding in the Midwest, waters rising to swallow entire towns while people climbed to their rooftops waiting for rescue that sometimes came too late. But Daniel revealed to me that the natural disasters weren't the only challenges Jesus showed him. He said he witnessed something even more troubling, scenes of humanity turning against itself. He told me he saw communities fracturing along invisible lines, neighbors who had once helped each other becoming suspicious and hostile. He explained to me that Jesus showed him protests that turned violent, not in distant countries but right here in American cities, with people shouting and fighting over beliefs and ideologies while forgetting their common humanity. Daniel said he began to weep as he watched these visions, overwhelmed by the suffering and pain. He told me he turned to Jesus and asked why these things had to happen, whether humanity was doomed to destroy itself. He revealed to me that this was when Jesus's message shifted from warning to hope. Jesus explained to Daniel, "My son told me that everything he had been shown was not a fixed destiny but rather a crossroads." He said Jesus told him that humanity stands at a critical point where the choices made in the coming years would determine whether the world descends into darkness or rises into light. Daniel revealed to me that Jesus emphasized that these disasters and conflicts were not punishments from an angry God but rather consequences of humanity's choices, the accumulated effects of treating the earth carelessly and treating each other without love. But then, Daniel told me, Jesus showed him something different, something beautiful. He said the visions shifted to show alternative futures, possibilities that could unfold if humanity chose a different path. He revealed to me that he witnessed communities coming together in the aftermath of disasters, not with despair but with determination and love. He told me he saw neighbors helping neighbors, strangers becoming family, people of different beliefs and backgrounds setting aside their differences to serve a common good. Daniel explained to me that Jesus showed him hospitals where doctors and nurses prayed before treating patients, and where miraculous healings began to occur that medical science couldn't explain. He said he witnessed churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples overflowing with people seeking connection with the divine, not out of fear but out of genuine longing for spiritual truth. He told me he saw families gathering for meals again, putting away their devices and truly seeing each other, reconnecting in ways that strengthened the bonds of love. He revealed to me that Jesus showed him young people, teenagers, and children, rising up to become leaders in their communities, speaking words of wisdom and peace that inspired others to change. Daniel said he saw environmental restoration efforts, people planting trees and cleaning rivers, treating the earth with the reverence and respect it deserves. He told me he witnessed acts of forgiveness between people who had been enemies for years, reconciliations that healed generations of wounds. Jesus told Daniel, "My son explained to me, that every single person carries within them the power to choose which future becomes reality." He said Jesus emphasized that it's not about grand gestures or becoming famous heroes but about the small daily choices each person makes. He revealed to me that Jesus spoke about the power of simple kindness, how a genuine smile or a helping hand extended to someone in need creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. He told me that Jesus said forgiveness is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, capable of breaking chains of hatred that have bound families and nations for centuries. Daniel said that Jesus placed particular emphasis on the importance of faith, not as blind belief but as an active choice to trust in divine love even when circumstances seem dark. He told me that Jesus explained faith as a light that each person can carry within them, a light that grows brighter when shared with others. He revealed to me that Jesus said prayer is not about asking for favors but about opening oneself to receive divine wisdom and strength, about aligning one's heart with the greater purposes of love and compassion. My son told me that Jesus then spoke specifically about the year 2025, though the exact details of what he said about this time were less clear. Daniel explained to me that Jesus indicated this would be a year of significant change, a time when the consequences of humanity's choices would become more visible and urgent. He said Jesus warned that there would be increased turmoil, both natural and social, but that these challenges were opportunities for humanity to wake up and choose love over fear. He revealed to me that Jesus emphasized that 2025 could be either a year of deepening crisis or a turning point toward healing, depending on how people responded. Jesus told Daniel, "My son shared with me, that he needed to carry this message back to the living world." He explained to me that Jesus said specifically that children and young people would be crucial messengers for this time, that adults had become too caught up in complexity and would need to relearn the simple truths that children naturally understand about love, forgiveness, and wonder. Daniel revealed to me that Jesus told him not to be afraid of skeptics or doubters, that the truth of his experience would shine through his words and actions if he remained faithful to what he had witnessed. Then, Daniel told me, Jesus did something that changed everything. He said Jesus placed both hands on his shoulders and looked directly into his eyes. Daniel revealed to me that in that moment, he felt as if Jesus was downloading something directly into his soul, information and understanding that went beyond words or concepts. He told me it felt like his entire being was being recalibrated, tuned to a frequency of love and purpose that he had never accessed before. He said Jesus told him that whenever he felt lost or afraid in the days ahead, he should remember this moment and remember that he was never alone, that divine presence would always be with him. Daniel explained to me that he desperately didn't want to leave this beautiful place. He told me he begged Jesus to let him stay, saying he finally felt at home and couldn't bear the thought of returning to the heaviness of physical existence. He revealed to me that Jesus smiled with such compassion at this request and explained that his time to remain in this realm had not yet come, that he still had important work to do on earth. He said Jesus told him that he would return to his family, that we needed him just as much as the world needed his message. He told me that Jesus then placed his hand over Daniel's heart, and immediately my son felt a warmth spreading through him, a divine spark that Jesus said would remain with him always as a reminder of this encounter. Daniel revealed to me that Jesus spoke words of blessing over him, promising that he would never be alone, that divine guidance would be available whenever he sought it, and that his life from this point forward would have a purpose and meaning that would sustain him through any challenge. As Jesus stepped back, Daniel said he felt a pulling sensation, gentle but insistent, drawing him away from this heavenly place. He told me the golden meadow began to fade, and he found himself back in the tunnel but moving in the opposite direction now, returning toward the physical world. He revealed to me that he could hear voices calling his name, his father's voice, his brother's voice, and mine most clearly of all, like beacons guiding him home. Then, Daniel explained to me, he felt a tremendous jolt, as if he had been dropped back into his body from a great height. He said suddenly there was weight again, heaviness, and pain. He told me he gasped for air, his lungs burning as they filled, and opened his eyes to find himself in the hospital room surrounded by shocked doctors and nurses. He revealed to me that even though he was back in his physical body, he could still feel the warmth from Jesus' touch over his heart, and he knew with absolute certainty that everything he had experienced was real. As Daniel finished telling us this story that morning in the hospital, Thomas and I sat in stunned silence. Marcus was crying openly, and I found that tears were streaming down my own face as well. The rational part of my mind wanted to dismiss this as a hallucination caused by oxygen deprivation, but the depth and detail of Daniel's account, combined with the undeniable change in him, made skepticism impossible. This was not the imaginative tale of a 12-year-old boy. This was testimony from someone who had witnessed something profound and life-changing. The doctors, when they finally came back to examine Daniel, were baffled. Every test they ran came back normal, better than normal. There was no brain damage, no cardiac abnormalities, no explanation for why his heart had stopped or how he had recovered so completely. One neurologist told us privately that what we were witnessing defied medical understanding, that by all rights Daniel should have suffered severe cognitive impairment if he survived at all. Instead, he was healthier than before the incident, speaking with unusual clarity and displaying a level of emotional maturity that seemed far beyond his years. We brought Daniel home 3 days later, and life slowly returned to a new normal, though nothing would ever truly be the same. Daniel changed after his experience. The boy who had been obsessed with video games now spent hours reading, particularly texts about spirituality and philosophy. The son who had fought us about attending church now woke early on Sunday mornings, eager to go, though he often found the services somehow less meaningful than the direct connection he had experienced. He began volunteering at a local food bank, insisting that he needed to put Jesus' message about serving others into action. But the most remarkable change was in how Daniel spoke to people. He developed an ability to see into the hearts of others, to know somehow what they needed to hear. When our neighbor Mrs. Chen lost her husband to cancer, Daniel sat with her for hours, sharing with her that death was not an ending but a transformation, that her husband was at peace and filled with love. When his brother Marcus struggled with depression and felt worthless, Daniel told him things about his purpose and value that seemed to come from a wisdom far beyond his years. People began seeking Daniel out, drawn to the light they sensed in him. As word of Daniel's experience spread through our community and then beyond through social media and local news coverage, responses varied dramatically. Some people embraced his story with hope and gratitude, sharing their own experiences of faith and spiritual awakening. Others dismissed it entirely, offering scientific explanations or accusing us of exploiting our son. Religious leaders had mixed reactions as well. Some welcomed Daniel's message as a genuine spiritual experience, while others were uncomfortable with a child claiming direct revelation from Jesus. Daniel remained unshaken by either praise or criticism. He told me that Jesus had warned him that some would believe and others would not, but that his job was simply to share what he had experienced with love and let each person decide for themselves. He said the message wasn't about proving anything to anyone but about offering hope and a path forward for those who were ready to hear it. In the months that followed, I watched as Daniel's message began to create ripples in our community and beyond. Our church started a new outreach program focused on practical service and community building. Families that had been fragmented began making efforts to reconnect and heal old wounds. People who had been consumed with anxiety about the future started finding peace through faith and fellowship. Small miracles began occurring, not the spectacular kind but the quiet, profound ones: addicts finding recovery, marriages being restored, people discovering purpose after years of feeling lost. One particularly powerful moment came when Daniel was invited to speak at a gathering organized by several local churches. I was terrified for him, worried that he would be overwhelmed by the attention or that the audience would be hostile. But when he stood at the microphone, this 12-year-old boy who barely came up to the podium, he spoke with such calm authority and genuine love that the room fell silent. He told them what Jesus had shown him, emphasized the message of hope and personal responsibility, and reminded everyone that we are all connected, that our fates are intertwined, and that love is always stronger than fear. After he finished speaking, a line of people formed, waiting to talk to him, to share their own stories, to ask for guidance. A businessman who had been considering suicide told Daniel that the message had given him hope to continue. A mother whose family had been torn apart by political disagreements said Daniel's words reminded her what truly mattered. An elderly man who had lost his faith after his wife's death told Daniel that hearing about his experience rekindled something in him that he thought was gone forever. As I write this now, nearly a year after that October evening when my son's heart stopped beating, I find myself reflecting on how much has changed. The world continues to face challenges, some of them exactly as Daniel described in Jesus' visions. There have been natural disasters, social upheaval, and ongoing struggles with division and fear. But there has also been a quiet movement of people choosing differently, choosing love over hate, unity over division, faith over despair. Daniel continues to share his message, not seeking attention or recognition but simply fulfilling what he believes is his purpose. He reminds people that the future is not fixed, that every person has the power to be an agent of light in the darkness. He emphasizes Jesus' words about the importance of small acts of kindness, the power of forgiveness, and the necessity of reconnecting with faith and with each other. As for me, I am no longer the skeptical, practical woman I was before that autumn evening. I have witnessed something that defies easy explanation but cannot be denied. My son died and returned with a message that is changing lives, including my own. I have learned that miracles are real, that heaven is real, and that we are never as alone as we sometimes feel. Most importantly, I have learned that hope is not naive or foolish but rather the most powerful force available to us, especially in dark times. Daniel often tells me that Jesus' message was simple but profound. Love is the answer, forgiveness is the path, and faith is the light that guides us through any darkness. He says that the choice before humanity is clear. We can continue on a path of division and destruction, or we can choose unity and healing. The disasters and challenges Jesus showed him were not predetermined punishments but warnings, opportunities to wake up and choose differently before it's too late. Every night before Daniel goes to sleep, he places his hand over his heart, right where Jesus touched him in that heavenly meadow. He tells me he can still feel the warmth there, a constant reminder that he is loved beyond measure and that he has a purpose to fulfill. And every night, I watch my son and feel overwhelming gratitude that whatever power governs this universe chose to send him back to us, chose to give us this message of hope, and chose to remind us all that even in our darkest moments, we are surrounded by divine love. The future remains uncertain, and the challenges Jesus warned about continue to unfold around us. But because of what my son experienced, because of the message he brought back from the other side of death, thousands of people have found new hope, renewed faith, and a commitment to being forces for good in an often difficult world. And perhaps that is the greatest miracle of all, not that heaven exists or that Jesus appeared to a 12-year-old boy from Portland, but that one child's testimony could inspire so many to choose love over fear and to believe that a better future is still possible if we're willing to create it together.